Asheville View, and we're here with the amazing Dr. Fox, and today we're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion. Hi, Dr. Fox.
Hi, Aisha. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to have you here.
So glad to have you.
Thank you.
May not know this, but Dr. Fox is one of my mentors. He helped me and continues to help me clarify my mission, vision, and values around equity over everything, and for my portion of the Asheville View. And so we're glad to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Can you define for us equity and inclusion and diversity? Tell us the difference.
So let's start with diversity. Diversity really is just checking off the boxes. Diversity just means difference. Mm-hmm. And so we look and we put people and we pigeonhole them into categories, and we say that we are diverse, but we can be diverse and not inclusive. Inclusive means that we are inviting them to the table, we are giving them leadership roles, we are making sure we are providing all the resources that they need to have a voice and to be seen and heard with whatever the space is, employment, housing, etc. Right. So that's diversity and inclusion. Equity is where we are making first people aware of our current state of being and reframing the narrative of all of our systems. And so we talk about system biases, and systems are the foundations of everything that keeps a city, a town, a nation rolling. So we talk about the health system, we talk about the educational system, we talk about the criminal justice system, the financial system, etc. And within those, we have our current narrative that we must first understand before we can be equitable. So we have to understand that our current foundation of all of our systems are plagued by discrimination and racism. And we can go all the way back to early legislation where we've legislated some of this stuff, that if we're going to have equity, we have to challenge those systems' biases, and we have to be aware of them and then implement change within them. So equitable is looking at each of those systems, looking at what keeps people from being their best person, and then changing those procedures, policies, rules, and regulations that hold those folks back, that were intentional.
Well, I've got a question for you, and that is, when it comes to opening a business, because you've got all these people with really brilliant ideas without an opportunity to get the education on how to execute them. And what do you say for people of color or the LGBTQ community, or both, to start their business? What would you suggest their first thing do? Do you have a book you'd recommend? Do you have an education system you'd recommend? Like what?
So, there's a lot of free resources out there for folks. But the first thing is find a mentor that has that same passion that you have, that can guide you through the system. Because one of the system biases that we sometimes don't discuss is how do we even navigate the system. So we say, yes, the system has biases in it, but then who's there to help you navigate it? So I always like to start, again, with reframing the narrative. And for people of color, one of the things I say is know your history. We're on historic block here in downtown Asheville that for years was thriving with black businesses. And so part of that cultural narrative that we have to understand, and that system bias, was that these businesses were developed at a time when we had segregation. And so they were not allowed to be on downtown Main Street, USA, opening their businesses. And so the black communities looked at what was the gaps in their communities and created wealth and equity for themselves. So part of it is understanding that we have a rich history around the entrepreneurial spirit. The second piece of it is then to recognize what you don't know about starting a business. And that's where you need a mentor that can really guide you through the paperwork, the procedures, but really identifying your market. A lot of folks that I work with want to jump out and start a business, and I'll say, well, who are you serving? what's your products, what's your service, who your market, and is it a large enough market for you to be successful? So that's the starting point.
Okay. My question is concerning education, of course. Like I said, we're trying really hard. We're doing all these equity workshops, these equity models that the schools are adopting. We start it, we never finish it. It's always a trial run, and then we try it, and then it just kind of falls through the cracks. But my thing is, how can we do this at a very early stage in education? Let's not wait until high school to start doing all this equity work. How do we do it and do it effectively at a very, very early stage in our public schools?
So we really have to start from, as you're saying, the foundation. We have to start from the very beginning, but we have to first ask ourselves, why are these initiatives not being successful? Why are we starting and stopping? And so within whatever we're trying to do, we have to make sure we are including folks that have a voice in what the change is going to look like, what the lessons are going to look like. And so until we start hiring folks that are representatives of all communities,
Right.
we are getting, again, system bias of this is how you have to do it.
Right.
And I like to equate that with what we call the white savior complex, where with I do a lot of work with nonprofits. And so a lot of times with nonprofits, you have somebody that comes in, a grantor, that usually are from the dominant culture, that's going to come in and save the community and tell the community, this is how you do it. That usually fails because you're not having input from the folks that need it the most, that you're trying to help solve the problem. So if we're looking at education, we have to have parents involved, we have to have community involved, we have to have students involved before we can even start setting up the equitable training.
Right.
Yeah, so Dr. Fox, you've done a lot of work from in our community college system at the graduate level in community, and you've watched sort of equity start to unfold in our city. And again, we're very proud of Asheville for making this push towards equity, because I do think we are leaders in equity, but there's still some challenges there. And I'd like for you to talk for a minute about the time or the patterns that you see where equity continues to go wrong, and give us some solutions on how to fix some of those things that you see.
They tend to go wrong in every area where we have gatekeepers. And the gatekeepers,
Well, that's all over, right?
That's all over. And so your short answer is it's all areas. That you can't just look in isolation at the system. You have to take the system as a complete, complex system that when you make a change here, it's going to impact something here.
Right, right.
And so you've got to look at how the entire system comes together and analyze the system to say, what's our current state and where do we want to be? And what are the things we need to do? What are the strategies that we need to be implementing to get us to that next level? And that's usually the piece that I see that is missing around sustainability of projects. We haven't clearly defined our current state of being and truly acknowledged the biases and the institutional racism and anything else that are challenges within it, because we don't want to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And people's feelings get hurt
Right.
when you're talking about these conversations.
Right.
But you have to have those honest conversations. You have to talk about what the challenges are in changing those system biases. Because as soon as you start doing inclusion work, you're going to have some pushback from keepers and people who, this has always worked well. Why do we need to change it now?
Yep.
It has worked well for you. It has worked well for the dominant culture.
Exactly.
It has not worked well for everybody else.
Yeah.
But we also have to give people the voice and the wording as to have those conversations.
Yeah. And so how can we as community, as a call to action for everybody in the audience and even us here on the panel, what can we do to push equity and inclusion further? I'm not a big proponent of inclusion, but you're working on me. But how do we push equity forward?
Well, so Inclusion also can be wealth creation and wealth building and personal ownership.
Yeah.
It just means that you're being included in understanding the process, the paperwork, the
Right.
fees, everything that you need
But
to
see,
do.
I'm like, if I have equity, I help put the paperwork together. I help put the policy together. I help put everything together. So I don't really need you to invite me because I'm already there. If I have equity, there's no need to invite me. I'm there. I'm inviting you. I own it.
Right.
And
Right.
I just don't, I feel like people use inclusion as a clutch word so that they can feel mentally safe in their privilege. Like if I'm going to include such and such. And so that means I have the authority here.
Like
and I
throw some scholarships, get some diversity in here. Now we're not racist.
Yeah, now we're not racist anymore when actually
Right.
we should be determining how we include, we should be a part of the process. And I know that you're saying like, oh, we'll include you in the process. But no, I don't want to be included in the process, baby. I want to make the process. I want equity.
Well, but you got to understand the process before you can own it.
Right.
Right.
But I think that's also an assumption, right? Like it's an assumption that I'm not going to be educated enough to know the process, or it's an assumption that I'm not going to be ready because I'm a person of color. You're gonna include me, but I know in every room, after learning from you, Dr. Fox, there's not a room I can put you in where you need to be included.
Right, but if you are, so if we go back and just strip down the most basic definition of inclusion, it's information and resources.
Okay.
And so the equitable piece of that resource and information is having access to it.
Right.
So you may have the ability. I tell people, yes, I have a doctorate degree, but I still am discriminated against.
Right.
And so you have to have the ability to understand and connect with the information.
Yeah.
So you can own it, but you can't own anything if you don't even know the opportunity is there.
Right.
Yeah. And so I
Right.
think that's just good marketing. And I feel like, too, with the inclusion piece of it for me, that I still struggle with, and I struggle with a lot of words. So Dr. Fox and I go around and around about the word empowerment, which is another word I have a struggle with, but inclusion is one I really struggle with. I don't know. But it's like, that's an assumption that main white stream, white supremacy values and processes are the right processes. And I'm saying, how do you not know that I have a process that I created myself that's better, or that I pulled from Dr. Fox that's better, or I pulled from another resource that's better? So I still struggle with inclusion, and we're going to keep working on it.
Right.
We are.
It speaks the same to me as much as tolerance.
Exactly.
You're just gonna tolerate me?
Yeah.
You're just going to let me
Oh,
in and
like-
teach me your
See,
process.
you guys grew up here, were born here, so that those
I-
things offend you.
I'm from
I get
Tampa, honey.
excited when I hear tolerance and inclusion. I'm like, oh my God, I'm included in this. I'm tolerated. I mean, I get excited. I really do.
The way
But
I
that's
feel,
how we were.
the
That's
way
how.
I feel is
That's
like,
how we
I'll
were brought up.
tolerate you.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So an example may be helpful. So when I was a department chair of business administration, and one of the first things I noticed on the dominant white campus was that our students of color really didn't have a sense of community within the college life. And the other piece I saw quickly was I would be at my desk at my office, and students of color would walk by and stop and back up and look in the room like, why are you in there? Okay? So I quickly realized, even though that they were there in terms of equitable ability to apply for the college, et cetera, the other thing that I quickly found was they weren't getting the resources that they needed. So, there were days when I literally would get up from my desk and walk a student over to the student service building to make sure a flag was removed from their account or something else. But until you become part of that process, you can't influence that process.
I want to eliminate the process, but that's how. But like, that's me. I just want to eliminate the process and build new processes, because who's to say that I like your process? And you developed, was it the minority?
We started with the Minority Student Leadership Academy, which came from that same thought process that students of color, and particularly male minority students of color, and I like to say non-majority. I don't like the word. So getting with words, I don't like the word minority. Non-majority.
Non-majority.
So
I like that.
Our non-majority students weren't getting the
see how that's settled in
resources
my spirit.
that they needed. Now, they were capable of doing the college level work, But because of home environment and culture and things that they had not been exposed to, they needed mentorship.
Right.
They needed computer skills. And so we initiated a program through grants to have computer labs, which
Right.
became a sense of community where students could come in, they could do their work, but they also were among their own.
Yeah.
And-
It's like that's the edge of the cliff. It's like you can't dive much further
Right,
Right.
right.
than giving them a support system, but at the same time it's really hard to figure out what's going on in their lives.
Right.
Are they eating ramen
Right.
noodles every night?
And until you ask those questions, because I can tell you I found some things out about personal life that was probably more than I ever wanted to know. But do they even have a home?
Yeah.
We had several students
wow.
that were
Yeah.
homeless.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Oh,
would,
wow.
that
Oh, yeah,
would
we
get
have
to
so many of those.
the school early
would
to
never
wash
know.
up
Yeah.
in the bathroom.
Yep.
But until you have somebody in a position to recognize that and see that and then connect them with
Yeah.
the resources.
Without the
they have.
connection,
I
you
just
will
wanna say,
never know
though,
that.
there are students who are in the non-majority who are homeless, who don't have anything to eat, and they fit into the system just fine. They don't need a word like inclusion to follow up with them. Their teachers just love them.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like a lack of love and a lack of investment, because it's not just Black students who are hungry. It's not just Latinx students who have these issues.
No, it's
These are
all
all
sorts,
people.
yeah.
People have issues, and we have an unfathomable amount of hunger rate just here in our city, and it affects a lot of people. Food insecurity, the food deserts affect a lot of people, but it's like because I'm Black, I need to be included.
But it's
No.
not even necessarily love, it's about someone that cares for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Cares to even know
Working
what your
in a nursing
situation is.
home or working in nursing homes like I have, I don't think I love them. I really care about my residents.
What's the difference?
The difference is that you want the best for someone and you're going to help them get there to the best of your extent. The other one is emotional to the
Okay.
point where you love them. There are people who care, and those make the best teachers.
I care and love. I'm
Yeah.
like all
Like,
the way
I'm
deep
in, I'm
there.
in.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
so in. Yeah.
Well, and going back to your question about changing the process and owning the process, one of the things I did was once I was in the process, then I'm a gatekeeper now.
Yeah.
So now I'm hiring people.
Right.
So I was like, why do we not have any people of color that are adjunct instructors? Well, because we require 5 years of experience. Well, why are we requiring 5 years of experience? Don't we want somebody that can communicate with students, that can share their knowledge? It's proved to me 1 year is better than 3 years, is better than 5 years. So changing that to say we're seeking folks that can teach these subjects that have demonstrated communication skills, open the floodgates of being able to hire folks of color that have been excluded because we had a criteria,
Right.
a system bias that excluded them. But you can't change that system bias until you are aware of it and you're a part of it, where you then become a decision maker.
So
Right.
you gotta infiltrate the system and be the
And
agent.
become
That's
So
right.
y'all know I always say there's at least one agent in the room.
That's right.
So you gotta become an agent in the system. You have something to say before we go? Our producers
Before
are
we
cutting
go,
us
I just
off.
want to take that back. I think the key is you find one thing you love about someone.
Yeah, and that
think
makes you
that's the
care
key.
about them.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. So you are watching the Asheville View, and we'll be right back.